A little different for me. This is probably the first time in, I don't know, 10 or so years that I've coached on campus as far as the start of camp and much of camp. So we've been very fortunate the last few years, obviously, to go to Platteville, and then even my time at Cincinnati, we were gone for most all of camp. And so this is just a little bit unique and different. Not that it's better; it can be a hell of a lot better, but it's still just a little bit unique and different. Getting used to, I didn't pack some bags and things like that. So getting back in the swing of things here is unique. But great first day, to be honest with you. I think both sides of the ball, we had a lot of the things that we're looking for, as far as a competitive spirit, even a little bit over competitive spirit, but on both sides, I think they made some plays down the field, which was really nice. And you can see a confidence level that's building, but also, a competitiveness, guys battling with each other. And that's kind of what we've asked for as far as not just the team and things, but as far as even leaders. Hey, we got to challenge one another as leaders, and we got to make sure that we do that every single day, because that sets the tone for everybody in the program, everybody out here. And so, obviously, it's a good start. We got a hell of a lot more ahead of us, but we got to start somewhere, and this is a hell of a day to start with.
Coach, Brian Jackson was used almost.
Who's that?
Brian Jackson was used almost exclusively as a short yardage goal line back at his last school.
Yeah.
What's kind of impressed you about the way he stepped into a new role for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot to be known. I think that's the hard thing with all tailbacks in particular. You don't go live much, so what do you really see from these guys? We're fortunate enough to go live a little bit in the spring and saw some things that I don't think he's just a short yardage back. I've seen there's a definite growth as far as his ability to be an every down back. We've challenged him in some different ways, because I think sometimes you get labeled as a short yardage or bigger back, and it's okay to be just bigger. And so we challenged him in some ways to start to change a body and do some things that, for me, just tries to say, hey, how dedicated are some of these guys to doing what we think is best for them. And so he's shown us all those types of things, and I believe it's going to transition onto the football field as well. I think I know I do. I know Coach Ebb does as well. I know Coach Grimes does. Have a lot of confidence in him, and excited to see what he can do as we really get rolling through camp.
Michael Garner's a guy. He missed the back end of spring. Yeah. He's back out there. What's kind of stood out to you about his progress and what he's kind of giving you right now?
Michael has done a good job. Michael's had a roller coaster ride. He made some strides, real big strides in the winter, and then had a little bit of a setback in spring ball when I think he missed the second half of spring ball, but was on a really good trajectory. And so we kind of challenged him as he came back at the end of spring football and through the summer stuff a lot. And it's day one, so it's hard to sit here and say, but like where Mike is compared to where Mike was a year ago is a far cry difference. And I don't mean by his body and his size. I mean by just his mind and his heart. And where he is right now compared to where he was at the start of winter or even at the end of spring football, Mike is in a great place from what I see. We know there's some things that we got to consistently be able to do to keep putting him out there and putting him in these positions. But he's taken some ownership, not just of himself, but of that unit. And I think there's some really good things on the horizon for him, and we need him.
You have some really physical corners, and we've seen that throughout spring, and then obviously a little bit today, as much as they can. What does that change defensively for you when you know you got corners that are willing to tackle, that want to get into that box and play?
I think that group in general right now is one of the more, I don't want to say just competitive groups, but there's some depth there, there's some youth there. I think throughout the entire group there's a completely different skill set. We got size, we got length, we got speed. I'm not saying everybody has all the same things, but I think what they do have is they have a competitive spirit. And that's where I think there's a difference. And I don't say anything against before, but when you put a lot more guys in a room, when you put a lot more guys in there with with the will and the passion to play the game, boy, it creates that natural competition and competitive spirit that sometimes it's really hard for as a coach to generate. And so a lot of those guys have done that. J-Rob's done a phenomenal job with that. Jay Scott's done a great job with that. There's just a lot more flexibility for us and finding out and figuring out. The key for us always is going to be defensively is how to figure out first and foremost who the best 11 are. And a lot of times the best 15. And then finding a way to get those guys onto the field. And so if there's 3 or 4 corners that can be out there, then we got to find a way to get them out there. And I just feel like that's a position in particular that is really, really going in the right direction. I'm excited to see what happens through the next 20-some days.
With Darian Dupree, when you have can catch a lot of passes out of the back, do you feel like that skill set could be utilized more this season?
It is. I think you saw a little bit of that today. But I think that's where the evolution of what we got to do offensively. And another thing about that room is, man, that there's only so many carries. I don't care if you run the ball 45 times a game. There's still only so many carries. And those guys got to put themselves in a position that they got to be able to compete. And we got to be able to figure out, we're not going to go into game one giving everybody opportunities. That's just not the way the game is played, right? So guys are going to have to earn these opportunities. And they all have a little bit of a different skill set. Darian has obviously proven and shown us a lot of things through last year and the year before, but he does have a uniqueness that he's a very, very good receiving guy out of the backfield. So we'll find ways to be able to highlight that, but it still comes down to those guys back there. They got to be able to run the football. They got to be able to stick their nose and face up in there and protect and block as well, and everything else will build from there.
Coach, how have you worked towards cultivating a more defined identity for this year's team as opposed to last year?
Well, I don't know that we worked that much different. Like you said, the identity is not what you put on the wall, and that's probably the most difficult thing. From last year, we believed we had an identity, but as you get into the season and things start to go, that identity wasn't, probably what was going to win us some football games and a lot of different things we were doing. So sometimes you have to redefine that. But to me, it's how do we say, hey, what is our identity? It's what we do on Saturdays, Sundays in particular in the first week. Internally, we know what we want to be. It's been very clear. It's been very clear to our players. The players have been very clear in their leadership and their standards of what they want to be and how they want to go about their business. Now our whole objective is now we got to put that stuff on film.
Coach, what do you think of Colton's first day of fall camp?
It was a good day. I think that go back in and watch, but I know that early in the practice, I think maybe there was a little bit, as we started off with maybe some jitters, but what I was most impressed with is everybody wants to make plays. Everybody wants to throw the ball down the field. We've heard all about this and, all the hype and different things. I was most impressed with him today is taking what was there and being really disciplined in some of the things he was doing. And if that means dropping the ball off, that means taking the short route. We all want to impress on day one, right? Everybody does. Every kid out here, every coach, everybody. The ones that you start to see the maturity growing are the ones that, hey, on day one, let's make sure that the fundamentals and the little things that are going to give us a chance to be great, we got to make sure those are highlighted. And if there's one thing I thought he did a really, really good job of today was that.
There's a lot of competition for spots, obviously, this early on. Quarterback, is the plan to sort of split reps with Deuce and Ryan for a few weeks and see who emerges?
It is. I mean, that's. I mean, I haven't shied away from saying one of the best things about where we are now from where we have been is that quarterback room, and I just feel like there's some competition there, there's some depth in there, there's some guys we got to find out a lot about because you don't know everything, and it's hard to say if guys haven't played a lot of live ball at this level, but we got to do our best to give them opportunities, but there's only so many reps too, and that's what's going to be hard on maybe some of the others that fall just out of that 1, 2, or 3. Because there are a bunch of guys that are bunched in there. The reality is it's closer to that next level where those guys behind that don't get as many reps, they better study harder, they better pay attention more, they better be more mature because their chances and their opportunities are going to be there, and they're going to have to take advantage of them. But as a whole, that group, there's definitely a different feel.
What needs to happen for this offense to make a jump this season? Probably could be a long-winded answer.
Well, I don't.
Right.
Everything's going to be somewhat of a chump. I mean, we, as we ended the season, we did what we had to do to try to win football games. But it's going to start up front. I think that no doubt we have to do a better job as coaches in making sure a part of that identity that we talked about is being who we want to be, and that means we got to get really good at the little things. And so it's going to start up front, and it's got to be where it is. I'm happy for that. I think that there's a group up there. We got to develop some more depth. But it's all going to come down to what the identity of that front can really, truly put on film. And that doesn't mean you can't throw the football. It doesn't mean you can't, as long as you can protect, as long as you can get you saw some things out there today. I think there's some different guys on the outside for our offense, and that's awesome. And that's going to give us a lot of opportunities, I think, and stretch some field and at least make people play a little bit more, honestly. But it's still going to come down to, hey, the identity of the things we got to be able to do. It's got to start right there in the core of it. Starts at center and it works its way out. And that's what we're going to talk about every single day.
Coach Tressel talked about yesterday 2 areas of improvement he wants to see on defense as takeaways and being dominant on 3rd and long. Is that something you talked with him about, or do you share that sentiment?
No, we talk about it all the time. But I obviously 3rd and long, the key to 3rd and long is getting to 3rd and longs. Obviously, we were not as good last year statistically, and that's where we got to get better. But it still starts with getting yourself to third and long and being damn good on first and second down in particular. The takeaways thing, I think, is one of those things where I said it last night in our first meeting. When you see a defense that gets takeaways, you see a defense that has confidence. And I know they don't always come hand in hand, like, oh, well, the ball just got tipped. I'm telling you, a confident defense is a defense that finds a way to create turnovers. And so that's a progression. You can put as much emphasis on it. We start off with the turnover circuit, all these little things. But the thing that I felt really good about in the growth of that defense is a confidence level, a leadership level. And that's where I'm starting to feel like, okay, these things are going to happen. But it has a lot to do with who, not just those guys, but the confidence level those guys have, and not just going to get the ball, ripping at the ball, punching at the ball. It has to happen, but it doesn't just happen.
Is it a challenge when you have this many guys on the edge from defense that possibly could play to find the situations or the practice snaps to let them show things?
I think it's the same thing. It's like being great on third and long. Well, you got to get to third and long. You know, having some guys that can rush the edge, you got to get to a situation, a position where you can rush the edge. So those guys can't be great, even if they have talent, if we don't have the ability to, especially for those guys inside, to be able to stop the run and get us into some more situations like that. But it does give us some flexibility. It does give us the opportunity to not wear guys out in camp. And so that's the balance where we are today is, you know, how much, look, this is going to be a tough physical football team, and so you got to practice that way. How many reps, how long, you know, how competitive can you do, you know, as you got to make sure that you got the right ones getting to game one as well. And so it's great when you have some more of those guys that they can truly get greater opportunities to find out and see what they can do, because there are still some guys, like we've seen a lot from Sebastian Cheeks, but you know, how much can Nick Clayton grow? How much can Liam grow in that? So there's a good balance to that thing, but I think it helps us create the identity up front as an offensive line as well.
Coach, you mentioned at the top the over-competitiveness we saw today. There was a bit of a skirmish at one point. How do you balance trying to stay healthy and as fresh as possible heading into the season while still
We're not worried about being fresh. I think the health thing is the key. You know, as we get later in camp, that freshness is definitely something that we will, you know, talk about. And we got to do a good job at figuring out and knowing our team, whether they got older guys, younger guys. You know, we did some things last year that turned out, you know, in the long run, really good with the way we handled Mason Riger and some of that. And you know, that's not how you handle everybody, but I think that I've learned from some of that, and we got to make sure we figure out how we're going to handle some of these, you know, guys that maybe are older or have had injuries to make sure we're in a good place. But in particular, on the first 10 days, this is, I'm not saying it's 1993 and coaches out there, but like, I don't know that it's much different than 1993. And we all have to embrace that and understand that, you know, after we get past those first 10, then we got to start to figure out where we are and what we need to do. How does this identity grow if it's really going to show?
Coach, you had mentioned way back at the start of spring, I think you called it a play hard board or something like that. Does that thing get wiped at the start of fall camp?
No, it doesn't get wiped. I mean, there's a select few guys that are on it, but it's something that as we get further in after 10 days, we'll start to, you know, make a point about of hopefully having guys that we can add to it. But there's a consistency piece to that thing, that it's not just like after 1 or 2 days, you know, we don't ever put anybody on after summer workouts. Well, you know, you've seen some of the things that were posted where the Iron Badgers and things like that. That's phenomenal. Those are awesome. Those things have to translate to the football field. And so to be looked at in this program and this team, like there's some things you got to prove on a daily basis, you know, over time. And so the better we do with that, I promise you, the better confidence we'll have. We'll create a greater identity that is obvious to all, that I don't have to tell you about.